Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid. But today is the 4th of January 2024, and these are the stories that we will try to decipher during the course of the show. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, with Indian financial irregularities that we've been seeing over the last few decades, but we don't see any action whatsoever from the international organizations like the FATF or others. Now, I'll just give you an example. In February of 2022, India witnessed its biggest ever banking fraud of around 22,842 crore rupees involving ABG shipyard in the last decade. The Enforcement Directorate of India has registered the highest number of money laundering cases, with the number rising as high as 1,180. Despite that, only 25 people to date have been convicted of charges. What is exactly happening? And we all know how India is involved directly and indirectly with transnational terrorism as well. Is this related somehow directly or indirectly with that as well? We'll be trying to understand that during the course of our first segment. In our second story, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to talk about something that we had been talking about for quite a number of months in the past, and that is COVID-19. Now, the NCOC has issued a statement in which it talks about a new variant of the COVID-19, that is the JN1, and it has enforced certain stringent measures, especially at the airports, for the international passengers who will be arriving to Pakistan. Now, 2% of these travelers coming through all point of entries are going to be screened for COVID-19, and we all know what the major symptoms of COVID are. And at the same time, of course, the importance is also now keeping in mind the fact that there are no cases of JN1 for the moment in Pakistan, but we need to be extremely careful in the future as well because of the weather and the flu-like symptoms that COVID pertains to. Then we are going to talk about, ladies and gentlemen, in our last story, the Israel-Palestine conflict that has now entered its 90th day. Ladies and gentlemen, 3 months, almost 3 months have passed since this conflict began. We are the 4th that began on the 7th. And the fact remains that 22,313 people have so far been massacred, and at least 57,296 have been wounded in the Israeli strikes on the Palestinians, while the world looks on. This is going to be our third segment of today. We'll begin with our first story, and that concerns the financial irregularities, India, and should I say the compliance that is needed by international organizations like the FATF. We've been joined by Brigadier retired Masud Ahmed Khan Saab in the studios to discuss more about that. Brigadier Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. Brigadier Saab, Pakistan has gone through the FATF, and it took us a long time, more than once, to come out of the FATF. Now that we are out, and of course we have we are as per the different regulations of the FATF in the blue or in the white, however you put it. But India, Brigadier Saab, since the last few decades has been involved in different kinds of irregularities, financial and others. We've discussed others, but today I'd like to kind of concentrate on the financial aspect of it all. Why has India never been implicated in any of these scandals?
Thank you very much. First of all, the system is not fair in the international arena. It is based on the hypocrisy, and we say the FATF, which is a political tool, has become which is a technical tool, now has become a political tool used by the powerful countries for their interests. That's why, because India has is an important country in the region for the international powers. So therefore, they are basically ignoring the Indian involvement in the financial corruption, money laundering. There are several reports in the past. That is very unfortunate part of it. Look at in case of Pakistan. Pakistan was put on the grey list in 2008, then 2012 to 2015 for violation of Charter of 1267 of United Nations. Then in 2021, and in our case, the situation, our performance reviewed for 5 times, and ultimately, then despite the fact we fulfilled all those 40 recommendations or the questionnaire which was set by the FATF. Unfortunately, it was delayed because it was used to pressurize Pakistan. because IMF, World Bank, they are the basically having an observer status in the FATF. So they have the importance. So that's how things are being controlled by the powers. So this is the case in case of India, because India being a policeman in the region, so therefore that is one of the factors.
Are they being given a free rein because of that?
Yes, certainly.
All right. If you look at the different scams, and I just mentioned one in my introduction, in February 2022, we had the ABG Shipyard Limited fraud of around 22,842 crores. Then in 2020, a founder of a bank called Yes Bank was caught in a financial fraud case, wherein the Enforcement Directorate had attached properties worth 2,203 crores, including his personal property. I mean, there's a list that goes on and on as far as the scams is concerned. A country that says or considers itself to be the world's largest democracy and a pluralistic country, don't you feel that it should have adhered to the basic values and should have stopped things before they escalated to a certain level? Because when we look at the money laundering cases, just the money laundering cases, forget the rest, they are in the thousands.
This is what the report which was initiated by the global non-profit organization, which says the FATF recommendations or the questionnaires are being used, or they have weaponized their own laws in the garb of the recommendations of FATF for their ulterior designs by the Indian government to crack down on the opposition and those who are criticizing the Indian governments. That is how things are basically happening inside India. So that is one of the factors. And secondly, as you said, they were according to, probably it was reported in one of, probably in the United States, there were 44 banks, the transaction which were reported suspicious transaction activity. There were 44 of billions of dollars over a period of time. So that is on record. So therefore, the things, the India, they have been in the past identified, nominated of their involvement in money laundering. Even there were reports of money laundering of the involvement of Sangh Parivar, getting funds and getting funds from outside and then subsequently using against the minorities, especially the Muslims. So that is how the Indians, they are basically functioning at present inside India.
Brigadier sir, when you see now the transnational terrorism, of which open proof has been found in Canada, in the United States as well, and in Pakistan we have Kulbhushan Yadav as a prime example of transnational terrorism. When you add to this money laundering and the financial irregularities, are they somehow connected?
They are connected. If you, as you mentioned of Kulbhushan Yadav, if you listen to his confessions he made and the terror financing he made to the Baloch terrorist organization for their terrorist activities inside Balochistan and subsequently at Karachi. So he made a confession that this was a terror financing. Secondly, after 9/11, India used Afghanistan as a second front against Pakistan. There were 66 terrorist training camps. So from those terrorist camps, basically, they also terror financing was carried out to fund TTP and Baloch organization. And Chuck Hagel, then Secretary of State, is on record. He said India is using Afghanistan as a second front against Pakistan. So that is how that India is used Afghanistan and terror finance. Even at present, still they are doing it, and through their sleeper cells, and they are financing. And recently, all the attacks and some of the major attacks, the Indian RAW was involved. So that is how they are doing these terror activities.
Well, again, I'll come back to the FATF. Why has there been no control whatsoever in the past decade or decades as far as India is concerned? I understand the Asia-Pacific strategy. I understand that India is somehow very useful to the powers that be that are part of the FATF. You talked about World Bank, IMF, and everything is kind of interrelated. But what, in your point of view, needs to be done now by these international regulators?
Basically, it depends on, as India has exposed, especially when we talk of transnational repression of their involvement in killing Sikhs inside Canada, then the United Kingdom, and also planning to kill Pannu in the United States. and also involved in the killing of Kashmiris, refugees inside Pakistan. So that has exposed. And secondly, also the EU lab, which also exposed India in 2019, 2020, when there was 750, there were fake media outlets, and they also, this was also used, and the fund was generated from the terror basically, and so it was against. They were basically providing a printing content critical of Pakistan. So that is how the Indians they were using. But I think now with the recent developments, the India is exposed, and the way we have seen recently these statements given by the United States also, and subsequently probably there is some realization, especially when they are also involved in espionage in Qatar also. So there is a lot, many things are happening around the globe, and India is involved. Let's talk about the Indian involvement in supporting and financing the Daesh. So, according to print media, it was India responsible for bringing Daesh to the South Asia, and secondly, those who were involved in the terror, basically the bombing of Colombo, basically, which killed around 300 to 250 people. They were basically National Tawheed, one of the National Tawheed party probably. Said they got initial training, and their affiliation they were in Tamil Nadu, in India, South India. According to United Nations Monitoring Team report, the two states of India, where there is Karnataka and the Kerala, they are basically hub of this Daesh activities. In probably it was in the government of Karzai or Ashraf Ghani, one of the Daesh camps, they were raided by the Afghan security forces. Two Indians, the women, they were captured from the Daesh camps. Basically, they were deputy directors of RA, and basically they were there to distribute the funds. This is how Indians they are involved. Secondly, according to European Union report, and the components which are necessary or required for the making of an explosive or a detonator, an IED, detonators, detonating card, or the safety fuse. There are 7 Indian companies. Among those, probably there were 20 countries. The 7 they were Indians. This is how Indians they are basically financing and providing material support as well as financial support to these terrorist outfits, and mainly they are basically operating against Pakistan.
Looking at, I can very well understand and see how India has been operating, and with, I'm sure there is a very, very strong link with all this money laundering, with all the financial irregularities that have been going on within India, that the Indian journals have written very explicitly about. And I'd like to refer to the fact that only 25 people have been convicted in courts for the offense of money laundering overall, while 400 arrests have been made since this Enforcement Directorate was given the responsibility to do so, wherein there are 2,300 cases of money laundering and 14,000 cases of forex violation. Are the lacunas present deliberate, or are there genuine issues that need to be taken care of?
Certainly there are genuine issues, and last time probably it was 2010 when there was a evaluation report which was created by FATF, and now they are planning after this report, which was initiated by the global non-profit organization, and they requested this financial irregularities, and this is a classic case of investigation of Indian involvement in financing terrorism. And then they also set of these the pressurizing tactics which was used of raiding news click office, going for X office, then BBC office, and certainly operations or arresting the journalists, mainly Muslims. This is how the report was generated. Now, basing on this, the FATF is going to review the Indian standards of those 40 recommendation or questionnaire, the set questionnaire which FATF, the watchdog, has. So subsequently, and we will see there is a plan next year in June 2024. So then we can get a clear picture of how they are going to act in case of India.
But isn't this, it's money laundering, counter financing terrorism regime that India has been involved in? Looking at its, geographical structure or placement and the socio-economic stature as well, don't you feel this regime is a source of major threat for all regional systems?
Exactly, this is a situation of India has changed after 2014. As you said in the beginning, it is so-called shining India now has from secularism to it has become a Hindutva republic now. Basically, and the ultimate aim is to the Hindus are all allowed, all Hindus can live inside India, rest they have no right. Either they will convert Ghar Wapsi, love jihad and different concepts they are basically propagating. And ultimately, as we say, this is the how they are, as we said, transnational repression and killing, etc., and finding terrorist activity inside Pakistan. It is basically who's financing them? It is basically India is financing all the terrorist organizations operating against Pakistan, whether it is TTP, it is Liberation Organization, it is BLF or UBA, all those organizations, they are being funded. These are basically Indian proxies. So they are being funded, and see the leaders of these militant organizations, mostly you will find them mostly in visiting India, and basically the platform was provided to them when the European Union lab exposed them. Basically they were using these pseudo names of different organizations, and they were attending those seminars and other activities just to malign Pakistan. So the funding, again, it was generated from the Indian side. And even when the Pakistani case was in the process of final decision in FATF, I saw, and you must have seen this, there was a demonstration organized outside the FATF office. There was some about 2 dozens of those so-called Pakistanis. There were a couple of Pakistani, rest they were Indians, and this was used to pressurize basically FATF to declare Pakistan to stay that Pakistan should not be declared out of a grey list. This should be blacklisted. That was how the pressure was being built. So these are different tactics, and moreover, India has been is part of FATF. So therefore, they lobbied in the past to against Pakistan to influence those countries.
All right, Brigadier sir, why has India never made any voluntary disclosure request to any of its international counterparts of the issues that concern its financial irregularities? Is it kind of deliberately hiding it? Doesn't the world know or understand? If we are talking about it, don't the intelligence agencies across the world also know?
Everybody knows about the Indian involvement, and because, as I said, it is basically their interest. That's why they are ignoring the Indian involvement in so many things. That is only the factor. I think they have basically, I said that India is basically acting as a watchman in the region, and basically as a check against China. So that is the only factor, I think, and beside that India is a big market. These are 2 factors.
No, but I can understand India being a big market and India being used by certain powers that be against China. But the fact also remains that things can go in parallel. You can check and control and, pressurize India to take care of these financial irregularities and its transnational terrorism. On the same hand, you can continue to have whatever kind of cooperation you want to have with it. Why is, why are these lacunas being put on the side and not being catered to?
That is very unfortunate part of it. We submitted 5 dossiers. The government of Pakistan submitted 5 dossiers for the Indian involvement in terrorism inside Pakistan, their terror financing. Even we gave the name of 4 individuals for their involvement in the terrorist activities, terror financing, especially terror financing. One was Patnaik. He was involved in the basically the assassination, in the suicide attack against Siraj Raisani in Mastung, and while he was controlling the operation, sitting in Spin Boldak next to Chaman. So that was one name, and second name was there was one Angora who was in contact with the mastermind of the APS Peshawar attack. So there were two other guys. So the four names were given and to United Nations as well, and the United Nations was requested to declare them as a terrorist as per the United Nations Charter 1267, but nothing has happened. That is very unfortunate, and we have recently seen the irrelevancy of the United Nations, which has become when we talk of Gaza, because United Nations Security Council,
because of the veto power,
veto powers, and even General Assembly, there was a overwhelming majority. They voted for a ceasefire, but despite the fact, the powers of the veto power countries, nothing was done.
That is so true. But you know, when you look at these consequences and the fact that on the one hand, Pakistan is pressurized to an extreme when it comes to anything or whenever Pakistan wants to be, or the powers that be need to pressurize Pakistan. On the other hand, India is given a free rein. I've talked about it in the past during our conversation as well. But in your point of view, you talked about Pakistan's 5 dossiers that have been given, submitted with facts and figures. What will it take for India to be pressurized in order to restrain itself from using money for transactions such as those in terrorism?
Probably unless the European Union as well as the United States, basically unless they act, they prevail or they force the FATF to take these things seriously, or there's some resolution, nothing is going to happen. And we have recently seen the killing of Najjar and other Sikhs in the Canadian soil. Nothing has happened. The initial we saw the hype, and subsequently it has died down now. And similarly, the Pannu's plot, which was basically discovered, and again nothing has happened. Subsequently, and the national interest of the country that prevails. That is the unfortunately that is how things are going. When we talk of Middle East, same is happening. The national interest of the countries.
Okay.
That is, yeah.
But Brigadier Sahab, last question: do you feel in June we might look up to something concrete coming from the FATF as far as India is concerned, or will these financial irregularities, money laundering, and all for terror financing and for other purposes will continue unabated?
Probably let's hope for the best, and I think that Pakistan should take a stand in this case, and Pakistan should provide those details and irrefutable evidence we have, which we provided to the United Nations Organization, OIC, and the European Union, to the FATF also, with those Indian involvement. So we have all the evidences, and India is a classic case to be declared.
Of course,
yeah.
It has been one classic case since quite some time, in fact, and you know that better than I do. Thank you very much, Brigadier Masud Ahmed Khan Sahab, senior analyst, to have joined us, to have talked to us about something that was on our mind since quite some time, but we've never really broached the subject as one. We've talked about it as part of Indian machinations, but never as one single subject. And this time I really wanted to highlight this aspect, that is the financial irregularities. Thank you very much, sir, to have come all the way to discuss this. Let's come to our second story, and that concerns the COVID-19. Now, COVID-19 is something that's erupted across the world, and in Pakistan started basically in the year 2020. We did many a program as far as the SOPs that need to be followed as far as preventing yourselves and your loved ones from the COVID-19 as well. And then we had the whole bout of vaccinations, the different procedures that we needed to follow as well. And a lot of people in Pakistan did. There were the anti-vaxxers, but there were also those who followed the instructions to the T. Now, this time again, there has been instructions that have been given by the NCOC, that is the leading center as far as COVID-19 is concerned, and it has talked about the surge of a new variant, that is the JN1, across the world, and also has given instructions for certain precautionary measures to be enforced across the airports. We've been joined by Dr. Sardar Shoaib Khan, General Medicine Consultant, online. Dr. Saab, thank you very much to have joined us, and a Happy New Year. Dr. Saab, let's begin with the JN1. What are your observations as far as this variant is concerned? My first question would be about its virulence. Is it as virulent as the previous ones that we discussed?
Assalamu alaikum to you, Umar, and all your listeners. This new variant is another variant of the Omicron subtype, and yes, it has got some slight changes in the spike protein, which makes it more likely to be more transmissible. And in October in America, it was 0.1%, and in a couple of months, in December, the latest figures show that it is 30%. So it is one of the fastest growing variant of this Omicron subtype. And yes, it is more virulent, more easily transmissible. And that is why it is actually replacing all the other previous variants in UK and in America. And it is, we've seen this over and over again, that this COVID-19, every time, we develop immunity to the old variant, it changes a bit. And then there's a new variant which is more transmissible. So this is nothing that we don't know. We knew about this before, that it's gonna do this, and it is behaving as we did predict.
Dr. Sardar, Shoaib, the measures that have been taken by the NCOC here to screen 2% of the passengers at the different airports, is that a good measure? Do you feel we'll be able to understand if there are people that are infected with this strain? And how can we ascertain whether they are infected with this strain or with the flu or any other strain?
Yes, I mean, the effectivity of this screening is a bit debatable. The thing is that these variants will keep coming one after the other, one after the other. And now we know that COVID is not, is almost similar to a flu, and it will keep changing. What they will need to do is not only screen for COVID, but they will also need to do genetic analysis to know exactly which subvariant it is and whether they can identify whether it's JN1 or not. Their advice will be still the same. The most important thing is for us to continue to wash our hands, to continue to wear masks when we're going in environments where there's lots of people in enclosed areas. You can see that around the world, the guidelines haven't changed. They haven't asked for people to test before they travel abroad. People haven't really, closed down universities or schools or anything. It's just a case of keeping an eye on the variant to see how it's evolving. There is no evidence to say that it is any more dangerous compared to the previous variants. There is no evidence to say that it is, the previous immunity works against it. If you had previous jab against previous variants, it's still going to give you immunity against this. So it's just a case of keeping an eye on how things are moving, how this variant is changing shape, and we know what it's doing. But really, practically, from a population point of view, there's nothing much that changes for our people. They still need to do all these, washing hands, wearing masks, and don't need to worry about it. Don't need to be afraid of it. We still can go out. The universities can go on. The businesses can still go on.
Dr. Sardar, it's very interesting that you point towards the SOPs, because nowadays, I mean, I for one, and some others are also quite stringent with the SOPs even still now, and we are mocked at many a times. And I'm sure in the United Kingdom and other countries as well, there are many people who still look at you very strangely when you try to follow the SOPs, wear a mask or keep on washing your hands with sanitizer or with soap. How can we make the people understand that this is something, A, that we are going to live with for a very long time, and B, that we also have to live with following the SOPs?
Yes. I mean, remember, Omar, these are good hygienic practices anyway. Even before COVID, we knew that if you wash your hands, many times a day, that decreases your chances of catching illnesses. Not only COVID, but many other diseases. We have so many waterborne diseases in our villages, like typhoid, cholera, that if you wash your hands, you're going to decrease your chances of catching a disease.
True.
Whenever you have a flu, you should be trying to stay away from populated places anyway. You should be trying to shield other people from the viruses you have anyway. If you are wearing a mask, not only you're saving yourself from other people, you're saving other people from the viruses that you have. So these are good hygienic practices that are, that will improve your health. And if a big majority of the population follows these good hygienic practices, as a society will be more healthy. So really, we should not look at it just merely in the context of COVID or this new variant, we should look at it as in the context of how we live our lives, how we need to be hygienic, we need to be washing our hands, we need to be remember that if you have got a cold, you've got a cough, you remember that don't pass it on to other people, don't cough in
into open spaces. You
populated
have to put your
areas.
hand in
Just wear
front,
a mask.
or else wear a mask, so that when you cough, the particles are not
Yes.
disseminated within the air, and other people can get it as well. Speaking of getting virus, whether it be a flu or COVID, what are the basic signs and symptoms as far as the JN1 variant is concerned? Are the signs and symptoms similar or different than other variants?
So there are obviously obviously it's a respiratory illness. It's always going to affect our respiratory system. So our respiratory system is lungs, our nose, our throat. So all the symptoms of cough, fever, runny nose, taste changes. But some scientists have noticed that actually this new variant gives you a bit more of these night, sleep problems. It may affect your sleep. It may give you a bit of anxiety. So, a lot of these, as these viruses changes, there are some subtle changes in the way it can affect your body. But overall, it's still going to be similar. You're going to feel really tired. You're going to have body aches. You may have fever, a cough, runny nose, change in your taste. But all of these symptoms can be affected by different kinds of viruses. There are some subtle changes, but I don't think it changes massively how we look at this disease in general.
All right. Finally, Dr. Sardar, Shoaib, I'd like to also understand in this whole context of COVID coming and with new variants, do you feel with time COVID is going to dilute? I mean, the new variants will not be as strong as far as their effects are concerned. And secondly, my second part of that question concerns the after effects of once you get COVID. I've heard of many people getting heart diseases, lung diseases, having complications while being operated, months after they were relieved of COVID. Is there any truth to it? And B, what needs to be done in that case?
So the first question about it getting diluted and becoming a general, it's already happened. Actually, if you look at the data in UK, more people in UK are getting admitted in hospital for flu than COVID. So flu is making people more unwell than COVID. So it's a cycle. So every year in winter you're going to have a COVID wave. People are going to get affected. The virus changes just like flu. The flu virus changes every year, and the vaccine for flu changes every year as well. So it's just the people that are more vulnerable, people who are elderly, people who are, who have other illnesses, people who have diabetes, hypertension, heart diseases. These are the people who are more vulnerable to this. But general healthy young people, for them, it's just another flu type viral illness that goes away. So really, it should be looked at as any other viral illness like a flu. The second part of your question about this long-term complications, the scientific evidence says that with COVID-19, when you get a bad COVID-19 you need admitted and you need oxygen, then you're more likely to develop complications such as having clots in your lungs. But if you had just like a viral illness and did not need to go into hospital, did not need oxygen, then the likelihood of that is very low. The other complication that you get is over the next 3 to 6 months, you may feel a bit tired. You need to recover from this respiratory illness. You may, get tired easily. If you're walking long distance, you may get breathless. Your cough may linger on for a few weeks. But again, it's different. Every person will have different. It depends on how badly you were infected by this COVID at the time and how long will you take to fully recover from it. Now, then there is a lot of noise in there as well. So people say, okay, I had COVID 6 months ago and now I've had a heart attack. Now, remember that having a heart attack is very common anyway. 3 to 5% of people in the community will get heart attack. And of those, if a lot of them will have COVID. So you can't really, associate everything you're going to get after COVID to the COVID itself. The scientific evidence does not point towards any increased risk of having heart disease, having heart attacks. People talk about, having a stroke due to COVID, diabetes due to COVID. No, there's no evidence to it. And the only evidence is feeling tired, generalized body aches and pains, and if you have severe illness, then you may get a lung clot. But again, the risk is very low for that.
Thank you very much for that clarification. With that, thank you so very much, Dr. Sardar Shoaib Khan, General Medicine Consultant, to have joined us, to have talked to us about the J1 variant of the COVID-19 that has not yet entered Pakistan, but of course the Pakistani authorities are taking the necessary precautions on how to deal with it as far as screening the patients, patients or those who come from different countries in Pakistan at the international airports is concerned. Thank you very much, sir, to have joined us. Let's come to our third story, and our third story, of course, concerns the day 90 of the conflict, the war between Israel and Palestine. At least 14 people have been killed and a number of people injured in an Israeli bombing of a house belonging to the family in Khan Yunus. And this has been going on in Khan Yunus and in other camps as well, refugee camps where people are already staying and have been displaced from their homes, and the Israelis are even bombarding those places. Of course, 22,313 people have been killed. At least 50,296 people have been wounded since this war began on the 7th of October. The Palestinian Prisoners Affairs Authority has confirmed and published the names of at least 51 Palestinian women and children who now have been detained from inside the Gaza Strip and are currently held in the Israeli Damoun prison near the city of Haifa. We've been joined by Dr. Jamil Khan. He's a foreign affairs expert and a former ambassador as well. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, to have joined us. Looking at the statistics, sir, 22,313 people killed on day 90. Almost 3 months have passed since this conflict began. When you look at the reaction that emanates from the world, apart from certain reaction statements, why isn't there any concrete action happening?
The demonstration of the alliances of Israel with very powerful countries like United States. And United States, the leadership, particularly in the Congress, most of them, they are quite under the influence of Zionism. And that influence of Zionism, it impedes any positive decision in Congress. And the same thing happens in the Security Council once it comes to the to passing the resolution for the pause, not even the ceasefire. Even that is opposed in the Security Council. So we are in a quagmire, that the world, on one side, 153 countries, in General Assembly, which is the voice of the world, which is the voice of the people of the world, they are in favor of ceasefire. They are in favor of the corridor, humanitarian corridor. But once it comes to Security Council, which is the only implementing entity of the United Nations, which can force Israel or any other country in the conflict to stop. But they are not doing it. So since they are not doing it, and the world on one side, 153 countries, their opinion on one side, and one country can veto it and cannot agree to the ceasefire, which means that these 22,000 innocent people, Palestinian, I think the history would remember this, that in such a short span of time, in such a short square mile of area, so many people have lost their life, and the rest of them are starving. The rest of them are going to die, most of them with the infectious disease. And this is what the World Health Organization had been saying, right? But still, the world seems absolutely helpless.
All right, Dr. Jamil, you talked about the food insecurity, Dr. Jamil, and I'd like to go towards that. An urgent appeal has been made for food, for fuel, water, sanitation, and hygiene services for the enclave's 1.9 million displaced people, 40% of whom face the risk of famine. Will neighborhood countries, will the United Nations, will the EU intervene?
Well, it's of no use. It would be of no purpose. Even if the neighborhood countries or the countries around the world, they start sending the containers and the ships of food, because there's no humanitarian corridor which is allowed in the a few trucks which are allowed. 148 trucks are required per day. And the Israeli forces, they have a full grip and control on all the routes, so they don't allow any humanitarian assistance. So even if you flood the entire the surrounding of Gaza and the surrounding of Palestine, bring the ships, unless it is really delivered to them. And this is what the United Nations is also saying. So there is no shortage of food. The countries, the world community is willing to send food and the other aid, but provided there is a pause, provided the forces which is now there under in full control of all the routes which is leading towards Gaza, these 19 million people who are starving, suffering from the infectious disease. It's not only the food. The World
There's an
Health
absence of clean
Organization.
water. Basically, if there's no clean water, then there is an outbreak of disease, and so many different kinds of disease that are prevalent amongst these refugees.
The dehydration is taking the toll of the children, and that's why you're finding so many children. They are just succumbing to their diseases. What is and the dehydration? This is what again the World Health Organization is saying. So not only the children, but even the adults, they are being dehydrated because the water is so scarce that they are not getting the water. There are about 800 people using one makeshift toilet, right? So we can imagine the kind of hygiene. There are pregnant women, there are more than 6,000 pregnant women. They are just delivering babies without any assistance in those hospitals. Do not have even anesthesia.
I mean, speaking of
C-section
hospitals,
is being
Dr. Jamil,
performed.
speaking of hospitals, the surgeons are also confirming a record number of amputations, Dr. Saab, of children in Gaza.
Without
and
anesthesia.
just look at how, I mean, more than, I don't know how many, 6 or 7,000 plus children have been killed, and so many have been wounded that the surgeons have resorted to amputations, and then there's not a necessary medicine for them. There's not even the necessary amount of anesthesia to, put them under when you operate on them.
Imagine the cruelty that we are amputating people because of the migraine, because of the infection, and because of other problems that they had to be amputated. But still, there's no anesthesia, and they are doing it while they are still in their senses, and there's so much of pain and miseries they are undergoing, and some of them are even succumbing to their injuries just during the amputation and during the procedure, during the surgery. So that's true. Now, what is the solution? The solution is that the world community, that, as I said, that in General Assembly 153, then first time it was 155, I guess, 125, and then later on the world conscious they increased and then the number of people, number of countries conscious, it was seen enhancing. And there were 153, but still, the only solution is that they should keep pressing hard on it. And the regional organizations such as OIC or such as AU, the African Union or European Union, unless they start imposing their regional sanctions on implementable sanctions, such as the trade boycott, such as the diplomatic boycott, as the 6-7 countries, they have already done it. And South Africa, they have already sent the entire case to the International Criminal Court.
Speaking of the International Court of Justice, I'd like to understand, now it's official, the International Court of Justice has confirmed that it is going to hold public hearings in The Hague on the 11th and the 12th of this very month regarding South Africa's case against Israel. Will justice prevail, or will it be justice delayed, justice denied?
If they make a decision, again, it comes down to Security Council, or even the Prosecutor General can seek the help of any member state of the United States to implement that. And Turkey has already volunteered that in case there is a decision of that court, Turkey would be willing to implement that, which means that Turkey has shown its willingness for the deployment, which means that the regional tension increasing. It means it has already increased with the killing of the deputy chief of Hamas political bureau, and it has already increased by killing of General Mosby, who was a friend and very comrade, not only a friend but the colleague of General Soleimani. And then look at what happened yesterday at the tomb of General Soleimani. So all these things are adding to the tension. Look what Iranian has said yesterday, that, and the tweet which has been issued and which has been written by the spokesperson of the president, and it says that they would take a revenge of it and words to that effect. So once these things are, this tension is brewing up, which definitely has the danger of escalating it. So Turkey volunteering, it would definitely take the region to further tension.
All
And
right.
in 24 hours, more than 3% oil prices have increased. And I can foresee if the tension is further increased, then the prices would also go skyrocketing, and the
So
world
there's
would
going to be a
start.
global repercussion basically of this conflict that is currently prevalent in the Middle East, and there's also a risk of that escalating into other different countries of the Middle East, as we've seen different examples of. Finally, Dr. Jamil, I'd like to understand a growing chorus of international condemnation from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, and others at the two Israeli ministers who called the Palestinians to leave Gaza to make room for Israeli settlers. Volker Turk, also the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, says he is extremely disturbed by these statements by the Israeli ministers. Will these statements have any impact?
Well, these statements, even Israeli minister, the defense minister, if you remember, he had categorically mentioned that they should use nuclear, and that was also condemned. He was taken off the cabinet for about a couple of days and again back and doing all the cabinet activities. So these two ministers also, why it was condemned by the United States? One, that there's a homegrown pressure building up on the Biden administration. Biden, according to the survey, has lost its popularity. And the forthcoming election, it appears that Biden would find it very tough to really make it for the next the second tenure. So that's one aspect. The second is the international legal aspect. Any such statement, and of course it's being implemented by the forces of the Israel. It attracts Geneva Convention Article 49, which means the change of or the forceful displacement of the occupied territory people. That's one. And then once that happens, it attracts the statutes of the International Criminal Court, Article 8. So that means that all these evidence, which is very much organized under the Article 18 of the OIC, where they have a designated Assistant Secretary General who is responsible to collect all these evidence and present it to the International Criminal Court, of course, within that framework. And that's how it can connect. And what is now happening with the prosecutors, once the South Africans have really moved that case, all these evidence would add value to prosecutor to prosecute them.
All right, let's see. I mean, the 11th and 12th are just a couple of days away, but on the other hand, with every passing hour, the number of casualties in Palestine, in Gaza, and the West Bank continues to increase. So are the incarcerations, so are the people, the children, the women who are wounded, and of course, the lack of medical supplies, the lack of water, fuel, food, and whatnot. This is all compiling to be a huge catastrophe in different forms, whether it be in forms of genocide or in other forms, for the people in Palestine. And let's hope that things come to an end before things escalate and they cannot be controlled anymore. Thank you very much, Dr. Jamil Ahmed Khan Sahab, to have joined us, Foreign Affairs expert, former ambassador, talking to us about day 90 of the conflict between Israel and Palestine. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new story segments that pertain to us, you and Pakistan. Stay safe. Allah Hafiz.